Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Dancer. I work at Mentor Canada as the Quality Mentoring and Capacity Building Specialist, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's training session for the Youth Employment Experience. I'll introduce myself a little bit further after I run us through a brief land acknowledgement. So as we gather virtually here together, both Mentor Canada and CPRA respectfully acknowledge that the lands upon which we operate are the traditional territories of the respective First Nations, Métis Nations, and Inuit, who are the longtime stewards of these lands. Next slide, please, Michelle. I already introduced myself a little bit, but in my role at Mentor Canada, I work with organizations across the country to really advance their quality and impact by engaging in our quality mentoring system. And in addition to my role at Mentor Canada, I'm also a PhD student at the University of British Columbia, where I've been studying mentoring relationships and their impact since 2014. And I'm also a long-standing volunteer mentor myself with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Canada. I'll turn it over to Erin.
Thanks so much, Ben. My name is Erin Love. I'm the National Program Manager at the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. I've been with the association for about 5 years and lead this particular program, the Youth Employment Experience, from the national level. Here with me today are many of the regional managers who you will know, as well as my colleague Gabrielle Sweeney-Tobin, who helps administer the program at CPRA.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, next slide, please, Michelle. So today we have 4 learning objectives, and kind of at its most broad level, we're going to focus on, what is mentoring? So the history, the core definitions and concepts, what are the roles of mentors? So what you should and shouldn't be doing in your mentoring relationships. We're going to cover some of the research-informed mentoring strategies that you can use to develop and kind of nurture a high-quality mentoring relationship. And then ultimately, our goal here today is to provide you with the knowledge and skills so that you feel confident entering your mentoring experience and relationship. So we have a Slido poll that we'd like you all to engage with. And in one word or a few, what would you like to take away from this training? So you can answer this poll by going to slido.com and entering in the code on your screen. Or you can also scan the QR code on your screen with your phone. Just to let you know, your answers will appear on screen for all of us to see. If either of those options aren't working for you and just technology isn't your friend today, just feel free to put your answer in the chat as well. Okay, new tools, inspiration, guidance on the process, how to support someone. Great. Inspiration, yeah, guidance is coming up a lot. What youth need for support, I like that one. We're going to definitely discuss that. Best practices, okay, great. Okay, so we're going to move on just for the sake of time, but please feel free to continue answering. And we'll take a look at the poll afterwards. But definitely some of your top answers, inspiration, guidance, best practices, supporting youth is what we'll be focusing on today. So I'm happy to see that. So our agenda for today is we're going to begin with kind of an organization and program introduction. So who we are at Mentor Canada, what we do, and then Erin will introduce CPRA and the Youth Employment Experience program. And then we'll really dive into what we're here for today. So what is mentoring? What is the impact of mentoring? What is your role as a mentor? What are the typical roles and maybe what you should be avoiding? And then we'll talk about some of the typical roles of mentors, right? So providing that social and emotional support, that knowledge and skill development, and then that advocacy and sponsorship. And then finally, we'll give you some practical tools and advice for kind of developing a mentoring relationship and kind of kicking off that first mentoring meeting with your mentee. Okay, next slide, Michelle, please. So for those of you who may not know who we are at Mentor Canada, Since 2019, we've really sought to engage programs, organizations, and institutions across Canada to promote mentoring experiences and increase the quality of mentoring opportunities to really empower young people in every sector to fulfill their goals through mentorship. And as the only national body dedicated to supporting and building capacity for mentoring, we work alongside governments, private sector, schools, community organizations, really at every level, so local, provincial, and national, to build that world-class mentoring ecosystem, particularly for youth facing barriers in Canada. And certainly today will help us fulfill that goal by equipping all of you on the call with the knowledge and skills you need to develop high-quality mentoring relationships. And I'll turn it over to Erin now.
Thanks so much, Ben. Again, welcome everyone. I'm here on behalf of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, so CPRA. CPRA is the national organization for parks and recreation across Canada, really dedicated to advancing community health and vibrancy through the sector. Through our partners, your PT members, we call them, your provincial and territorial parks and rec associations, we reach about 90% of Canadian communities. Next slide, please, Michelle. So as mentioned, CPRA is a network really of the 13 provincial and territorial parks and recreation associations. So if you're calling in from Vancouver, for instance, you would probably be a member of the BC Recreation and Parks Association, and the same would hold true for other members across the country. We are a collective of staff and volunteers and government officials. We're governed by a board of directors to move the sector at a national level. Our office is in Ottawa, which is where I'm calling in from, but we do have project staff across the country. Okay, so the strategic goals for CPRA: for over 60 years, CPRA has been a voice at the national level, advocating for parks and recreation and advancing the interests of our communities. We are a community in ourselves. We're a network. You may know of the bench that's online. That's sort of our online community, but we also have communities through our programs and our other projects, really dedicating to supporting people across the country. And we're also a service provider. So over the last 5 years, CPRA has made a really intentional effort to be able to provide, in particular, funding programs, but also other resources and opportunities for professional development for our mentors, our partners, and people of the community, such as yourselves. And Ben, back to you.
Yeah, so another Slido poll. So just to get a sense of who's here today, how many years have you been working with the parks and recreation fields? New to the field, 1 year, 2 to 5 years, 6 to 10, or 10 plus. And again, you can participate by going to slido.com, inserting that code, scanning the QR code on your screen, or just using the chat. Okay, so it looks like bit of a, oh, it's hard to tell. So 2 to 5 years or 10 plus years. Okay.
We have a few in the chat as well, Ben.
Okay.
10 plus years.
Okay. So a wide array of experience. So that's good to see that we have both, more tenured employees engaging as mentors, but also more intermediate level. So I'd love to see that. Okay, Michelle, we can go to the next slide. Okay, next one. So again, another slide, Slido poll. Have you previously participated in this program as a mentor?
No.
Okay, it looks like predominantly no. We have a few returning mentors. That's good to see as well. Okay, well, that's typical. That's kind of what we expected to see. For those of you who are joining again, we have revamped some of the slides, so hopefully some of this is a nice refresher for you and maybe some new content as well. Okay, Michelle, we can move to the next slide. Okay, it's over to you, Erin.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ben. All right. So the Youth Employment Experience program began in 2019. So we're now in the third and final year of the program. And at the beginning, way back in early days of 2020, I want to say that's hard to think about now. We knew we were embarking on this journey, and the Youth Employment Experience program, while it is a wage subsidy program, CPRA wanted to provide some mentorship opportunities to folks in the sector to really do a deeper dive and a deeper investment into building the skills of the next generation of leaders in parks and recreation. So we reached out to Mentor Canada and developed this really lovely, now long relationship of working together to support groups like you in the work that you're doing to support the youth in your communities. So I'll talk a little bit about the program, just especially based on the fact that many of you are new to this program. So the Youth Employment Experience has a goal of engaging about 350 youth over the course of the 3-year program. By the time we're done, we estimate we'll be reaching about 500 youth across the country. So we've been able to surpass our goal, which we're really proud of. We're also going to be connecting every single one of them with a mentor. So every youth that's engaged in the program will embark on a mentoring journey and a mentoring relationship. So that was sort of why we started developing this training, was we wanted to make sure that mentors felt well equipped and well supported in this. We didn't want to add any additional burden to anyone, especially during the pandemic when our resources were so stretched. We wanted to support this as much as possible and really set off every mentoring relationship on a good foot. Of course, we want to build the skills and expand the networks of the youth themselves. So we've had a few trainings that are specific to youth. And since COVID, we've been able to offer some youth summits where we bring the youth together at their local Parks and Recreation conference. And that's been really, really energizing and inspiring. And some really beautiful conversations have come for those opportunities. Goal number 4 is engaging youth who face barriers, and we'll take a look at some of the stats for who we've reached so far, but really providing opportunities for folks who wouldn't otherwise join the sector. And then, of course, the support to the communities. So the wage subsidy that comes along with this program, as well as some of the funding that comes to support the mentoring relationship, has been really valuable. And if you're familiar with the framework for recreation in Canada, you'll know that this program touches upon 4 of the 5 pillars of the framework. So here's a quick snapshot of what the program is at sort of a 50,000-foot view. So it's a 3-year program. Again, we'll engage well over that 350, probably closer to 500 youth. Each youth has 100% of their wages supported up to a cap of $10,000 through this program. And the mentors will have an opportunity for $4,000 to go to the organization to support their relationship. This program is funded by the Youth Employment Skills Strategy from the Government of Canada. Great. Last year, we're pleased to say that 86% of the youth who were engaged in the program were those who identified as youth who face barriers to employment. So we are reaching youth who need the support of programs like these. 27% of them were Indigenous youth, 17 were visible minority youth, 17% had not completed high school yet, and 5% of them had a disability.
All right, thanks, Erin. All right, so let's jump into it. So this first section is really focusing on what is mentoring. That's our first learning objective. So the history of mentoring. Really mentoring has been a core part of humanity for hundreds of thousands of years. If you're familiar with the term, it takes a village. That's really kind of reflective of that idea that, for across human history, we've all worked together to pass down knowledge and skills to help the younger generation, improve and kind of step into those roles as the leaders of their communities. There's even some evidence of cave paintings depicting mentorship of, older tribes people teaching the younger generations how to hunt and fish and participate in spiritual or religious ceremonies, right? So it's been around for a long time, but the first time that the term mentor appeared in the written record was during the Odyssey, which was a story told by the Greek poet Homer. And this was published, I think, around the 7th or 8th century BC, so 3,000 years ago. And in that story, Mentor was a trusted friend of King Odysseus. And when the king sailed away to fight in the Trojan War, he entrusted he trusted Mentor to look after his son and kind of look after his empire. And the word mentor itself comes from several Greek words, meaning to think, to counsel, to remember, and to endure. But over time, the term mentor has come to mean, a trusted advisor, a friend, teacher, and a wise person. So all of you on the call, you can now consider yourself a wise person for what that matters. So that's kind of the history of mentoring in a nutshell. Now we're going to take a look at some of the more modern mentoring definitions. So in a kind of simplistic sense, the Oxford Dictionary defines mentoring as, a mentor is an experienced and trusted advisor. Another definition that I really like is mentoring is a fulfilling relationship between somebody with more experience and somebody with less, with the goal of helping both individuals become elevated versions of themselves. Now, I like that definition because it really emphasizes that reciprocal and mutually beneficial nature of mentoring. So hopefully some of you who have acted as a mentor on the call today can personally attest to that. Being a mentor impacts you as well. It's not just about your mentee and helping them grow and learn. You will also experience those benefits. And then CPRA has its own definition. So mentoring is the pairing of an experienced or skilled person, the mentor, with a person who would like to improve their skills, the mentee. The mentor acts as a role model and supports the mentee by sharing knowledge, resources, and advice to help them improve their skills. Okay, so lots of mentoring definitions exist. So in the next slide, we're kind of going to boil it down. So what is mentoring? Well, it's a relationship that is first and foremost rooted in mutual respect, empathy, caring, and trust, right? A mentor truly cares about their mentee, wants them to succeed, is willing to empathize with their experiences and offer support, and kind of has that deep sense of trust and respect for the mentee, for who they are kind of right now. Another element is that it's focused on developing the whole person, not just knowledge and skills. So this is particularly important to mention because this is a workplace and career mentoring program. Mentoring relationships are focused on holistic development, right? Your role is there to, yes, obviously advance your mentee's professional knowledge and their skills, but you're also there to provide them with that psychological, that emotional, that social support, really help them integrate into the workplace and feel a sense of belonging in the workplace, right? Not that they can do the skills, but they belong at the CPRA. They can envision themselves as an employee here for the long term. Another element is that mentoring relationships are actually driven by the mentee and their evolving goals, needs, and values. So some of the most successful mentoring relationships, perhaps counterintuitively, are actually driven by the mentee. Mentors, as we'll learn, are powerful guides and advisors who kind of walk alongside the mentee's journey and offer support, guidance when and if they ask for it. But ultimately, it's up to the mentee to put one foot in front of the other, take your advice, take your guidance, and take those steps to improve themselves as an employee, right? And the final element of a mentoring relationship is that, as I've mentioned, it's reciprocal and mutually beneficial. So the mentor learns from the mentee and vice versa, right? So as a mentor, you're not this all-knowing expert, and mentees are not kind of passive recipients of knowledge, right? It's a collaborative learning partnership. So you're working together to learn and kind of grow together. So we have another Slido poll. And this is just, getting a sense to kind of apply the learning to your own life. Can you share a significant individual or mentor in your life? So you don't have to share their names, but maybe just, oh, my neighbor, they did this, this, and this, or whatever experience you've had. If you're comfortable sharing, we'd love to see it. Okay, so we have a coach, yeah. Supervisor, yeah. Teacher, parents, for sure. Former coach. Parents, high school, lots of coaches. That's good. Coworkers, supervisors. Yeah. So it's good to see that a lot of people have had experience with mentorship. So as a mentor yourself, I've certainly found that it's helpful to reflect on, what were the qualities and traits of some of my own mentors and how did they support me? And you can bring that to your relationship as well. Okay, next slide, please, Michelle. So you may or may not know that there's actually types of mentoring relationships. And there's two commonly discussed types. The first is a formal mentoring relationship. So this is what we're engaging with today, right? It's through a formal program. There's kind of a matching procedure, there's a structure, and there's guidance on how and when you meet, etc. You can also think of like a Big Brothers Big Sisters program. But there's also natural or informal mentors. And these kind of develop almost like friendships, and they develop organically as we kind of engage in the world. So teachers, coaches, supervisors, it seems like on the call today, a lot of us have this experience with informal or natural mentoring, which was our Slido poll in the next slide, but I think we'll just skip over that, Michelle, for the sake of time, because we've already kind of got some insights into that. So this section really focuses on the impact of mentoring and what research tells us about mentoring relationships. So back in 2020, we conducted a national research study that focused in part on the impact of mentoring on young people across Canada. And what we found in that research study was that mentored youth, so youth who had experienced mentoring relationships and programs, among them, 95% were more likely to have pursued further education after high school. 53% were more likely to report good mental health compared to their non-mentored counterparts. 78% were more likely to have an occupation. And 75% said that their mentor had a significant influence on their self-confidence. So, these are correlations. So we're not saying that mentoring leads to these outcomes, but they're associated with them. And in our individual interviews with the mentees, they said that their mentors helped them achieve these goals. And we present this research just to show you, the powerful impact that you can have on your mentee. You can make significant impact on their educational, life, and occupational goals. So just having that kind of in the back of your mind of the magnitude and scope of impact that you can have just by volunteering as a mentor. The next slide takes a look at some of the barriers. So our research study also focused on, okay, a lot of young people are accessing mentorship and benefiting, but who can't access these relationships? And we found that roughly 38% of the young people who answered the survey faced barriers to accessing mentorship during their teenage years. And there were three barriers that were commonly discussed amongst the mentees. They said, I didn't know how to find a mentor. I didn't understand what mentoring was or the value of having a mentor. And then there weren't any mentoring programs available to me. So again, we bring up this research to show you that, again, you're fulfilling a really important societal need here. You're addressing a really important need by volunteering as a mentor in the Youth Employment Experience program, specifically because we know that this program is focusing on some of the most, youth who are kind of underprivileged and don't have access to these opportunities. So just again, these two slides are to reiterate the importance of mentoring, the incredible power of mentoring, and again, to give you all a pat on the back and recognize the important role that you're fulfilling both in the CPRA and at a broader societal level. Okay, Michelle, we're ready for the next slide. So this section is going to discuss your roles as a mentor, right? So what you should be doing and what you should not be doing, which is our second learning objective. So we're going to discuss some of the common traits of mentors. So, mentors have many traits, many diverse traits, but some of the most common ones are listed here on the screen. So mentors are empathetic, right? They understand and share their mentees' feelings. They're able to kind of put themselves in their mentees' shoes and without judgment, really, that's a key component of empathy, not judging and experiencing their joys and challenges. It's about decentering yourself, getting outside of your perspective, your point of view, and really trying to understand your mentee and listening to them. And that brings me to active listening, right? Mentors are truly great listeners. They're able to give us all of their attention while they're listening to us. They ask clarifying questions, and they don't just wait for their turn to speak or offer us solutions after the mentee speaks, right? They treat it a little bit with more care and attention, and they're there to truly understand what we're trying to tell them without kind of jumping down and giving us more kind of action-oriented solutions to things. So mentors are truly great active listeners. They're also respectful of values. Your mentees will have all kinds of values based on how they were raised and their life experience. As a mentor, your role is to acknowledge and accept different beliefs, values, and customs. You're not there to impose your own values or beliefs, right? And this could be across the whole gamut of values and beliefs. This is about dignity and respect. Mentors are self-aware, they're patient, so they're graceful. They don't get easily frustrated by delays, difficulties, or discomfort. They kind of exude that sense of calmness, right, and composure, and help their mentees manage stress, cope with adversity, and make rational decisions. Mentors are trustworthy and dependable. They're solid people. They're reliable. They're consistent. They keep their word. They deliver on their promises. They're conscientious. They're careful, thorough, and diligent. They like to do a good job with whatever they're doing. And as a mentor, they like to be a good mentor. They're self-disciplined, and they take their role seriously and strive to fulfill their responsibilities to the best of their abilities. Mentors are obviously competent and knowledgeable. You need to have that base fundamental level of knowledge and skills to be able to impart that to your mentee. That was a bit obvious. They are competent. They're caring. They have an unconditional positive regard. We're going to discuss this in just a few moments, but they provide that safe and caring environment for the mentee to come and kind of express their frustrations or their challenges with that knowledge that they're not going to be judged. And I see a comment to explain self-aware. So mentors are self-aware, right? So they have that understanding of their strengths, their weaknesses, their communication tendencies, and they're able to, because they're self-aware, they're great mentors. They're able to build stronger connections because they have that emotional intelligence to understand, hey, this isn't my best day today. I'm coming into this meeting with this, this, and this, or they're self-aware of, oh, I don't actually have the knowledge and skills or the professional connections right now to support you with that goal. And I understand that's okay. I'm going to build some connections with you and kind of expand your professional network, or I'm going to expose you to some resources that will help you. So that's kind of that self-aware piece. Mentors are, they have a good-natured humor, right? So they're playful and lighthearted. They're positive, optimistic people who see the glass as half full, and they're really able to kind of diffuse tension and provide that low-stakes environment that mentees can use to kind of get away from the stress of their life in the workplace and know that, when I'm with my mentor, things are okay and I'm supported. They have high expectations. We want to challenge and encourage and push our mentees. So we have high expectations for them and ourselves, but this isn't perfection, right? And then, as I've mentioned a few times now, mentors walk alongside an individual journey. So the mentee is really in the driver's seat of the mentoring relationship, Your role is there to not impose your professional goals or provide directives or things like that. You're there to walk alongside their journey and provide that kind of guidance and advice and kind of be that opportunity for counsel. So now we're going to look at some of the kind of additional roles and responsibilities of mentors, right? So the first is to be engaged. This is perhaps a little bit obvious, but really bring your full attention to your meetings with your mentee, and don't just wing it. We have so many people who underestimate mentoring and mentoring programs, but mentoring can cause harm, right? Just because you walk into a room with your mentee, don't expect that mentoring is going to happen. And this ties into the next point, which is be proactive. So come to your meetings with an idea of what you want to focus on, what advice you want to provide, what resources you might link your mentee to, what professional connections you might expose them to. So these first 2 points are, I can't stress it enough, don't underestimate mentoring. Come prepared to your meetings, and just be attentive and engaged. Next slide, please, Michelle. Another important role of a mentor is to be autonomy supportive, right? And I've touched on this a little bit, but it's that point of you really encouraging independent problem solving, right? And as mentoring is a collaborative learning partnership, we don't want you to provide all the answers to your mentee, right? Provide them with just enough information and resources that they need to go out on their own and learn these lessons on their own and really develop their knowledge and skills. So don't just be there to provide everything for them. The next point is to be a connector. So this ties into what I was talking about as mentors being self-aware, right? If your mentee asks you something that's not in your wheelhouse, or you don't have a professional competency, and don't be afraid to say, hey, I don't know that. And either engage in a kind of a collaborative learning, sit down and say, let's learn this together, or expose them to other people who might have that knowledge or resources that might be able to help them. And then the final point is to be growth oriented, right? So encourage your mentee to work to the best of their abilities. That's that piece about holding them to that high expectation, that standard. And another critical element is providing feedback, right? That is what a mentor's primary responsibility is, to provide that feedback and guidance. So in a moment, we're going to discuss how you can provide research-informed feedback that will encourage and motivate, not kind of demotivate and discourage. Okay, next slide, Michelle, please. Another really important thing to consider as your role as a mentor is to adopt what's called a mentoring mindset. And a mentoring mindset recognizes that, our everyday interactions, both with our mentee and other young people in our environment, is an opportunity to engage with them, to seek to understand them and their needs more deeply, and as an opportunity that could be experienced as a mentoring moment. Right. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Don't underestimate the casual interactions that you have with your mentee or other young people, because, as a mentor, you've all volunteered to be a mentor. It's about kind of incorporating that into your identity, your sense of self. I am a mentor. If I see someone, a younger person who might benefit from knowledge and skill as a mentor, as something that I personally identify with, I'm going to pursue that opportunity and I'm going to engage with them to kind of nurture and support them because I'm a mentor. And in the next slide, we'll explore how you can actually do that. So the first step is to be intentional, right? So it's just understanding of the potential impact of everyday interactions. And that's why we talked about the impact of mentoring a little bit earlier, right? We all just learned about the powerful impact of mentoring. So understanding that as a mentor and really kind of engaging interactions with that intentionality. Focusing on growth. So again, treating everyday interactions as opportunities for growth. So, as that self-identifier as a mentor, you go about your casual interactions and see them as opportunities for growth and development. It's about being a connector. So as I mentioned earlier, it takes a village. A part of a mentor's role, this isn't a solitary role. We're here to connect our mentee to other opportunities if and when we can. And then part of developing a mentoring mindset is being accountable, right? So it goes back to that trait of a mentor who's dependable, trustworthy, and kind of follows through on their commitments and their action items. So if you have that interaction with a young person and say, hey, I'm going to connect you to so-and-so, or I'm going to register for you this program, actually do it. Follow through, be mentor-like in your approach. So now that we've had an understanding of, the typical roles of a mentor and your responsibilities, it's equally important to understand what workplace and career mentors are not. So first and foremost, they're not authority figures, right? Who act like supervisors or managers. So although mentors are often older and more experienced than their mentees, they don't hold ultimate positions of power over them. Maybe a bit obvious, but hopefully that's pretty obvious. And a mentor's role is to really provide that flexible support and guidance, not stifle their mentee's development by giving orders and directives, right? A mentee's voice and choice and personal autonomy is always the most important. Mentors are not therapists or counselors, right? So although personal and professional boundaries can often become blurred in workplace and career mentoring relationships, you're not there to psychoanalyze what your mentee says or does, right? So make sure that you're referring to outside mental health experts if any of those issues arise. You're also not cure-alls, right? So as we discussed, mentoring can and does often lead to a lot of positive benefits, but it's not a cure-all or panacea. Good mentors focus on the problems that they can solve based on their personal experiences. Mentors are also not missionaries. So, this goes back to the traits of mentors as being respectful of values, right? You're not there to convert your mentee to certain religions or cultural practices. That's just not what we're here to do. Just respect differences and values. And then finally, mentors are not advisors who offer advice at every step of the way. So this is, again, going back to that promoting independent problem solving, walking alongside an individual journey, and giving your mentee that space and time to make their own decisions and really kind of walking alongside them. So now we're going to look at some of the roadblocks to a mentoring mindset and mentoring relationships. I won't go over these because they're quite obvious, but you'll have the slides if you want to remind yourself. So we're not there to blame or criticize. We're not giving directives. We're not giving unsolicited advice. We're not judging. We're not moralizing or preaching. Okay, next slide, please, Michelle. So another Slido poll, just to get you to start thinking about and reflecting on your own role as a mentor. So what traits and qualities do you think are important to convey as a mentor? What are you going to bring to your own mentoring relationship? Confidence, friendliness, problem-solving skills, good relatability, trust, honesty, encouragement. Yep. Approachability, that's a huge one. Trust and respect. Yep. Openness. Okay, yeah, all great qualities and traits. So again, just remain conscious of those and try to bring those traits to your mentoring relationship. And we're going to discuss how you can actually bring some of these traits to your mentoring relationship in just a few moments. But before we get into that, we just wanted to talk about what you can expect from your mentees, right? So as a younger generation, they're obviously going to be at different stages of development. They'll have different life circumstances and experiences. They may have experienced systemic racism, and they might be experiencing mental health challenges. So, really every mentee comes from a unique situation. And as a mentor, it's your role to take that time to get to know them and build that foundational level of trust and respect so that you really know one another before you can jump into the mentoring relationship. So some examples that we commonly see in workplace and career mentoring programs are, your mentee might have limited transportation options to and from work. They might have a limited network of individuals to support them and kind of model appropriate workplace etiquette. They might not be able to purchase appropriate work clothes, and may have limited soft skills or technical skills to kind of complete a task assigned to them. So the idea here is to help you understand that your mentee will be entering a relationship with various experiences that could shape your experience as a mentor. And what we really want to stress and highlight is that's okay. Embrace these differences and really seek to understand your mentee and accept them without judgment. Be curious about their experiences and be gracious with them. Mentoring relationships are about learning and development. Provide them with that margin of error. They are going to make mistakes, and that's what this is all about, right? They haven't done this before. Accept their mistakes and see them as opportunities for learning and development. Really adopt that growth mindset. So now we're going to jump into what mentees want. And what they really want boils down to personal connection. So that trust, empathy, caring, support. They want connections to networks and kind of support. So we'll talk about how you can do that. And to gain a new perspective on the employment at CPRA. And then obviously to build their skills, their soft skills and their technical skills. So the following slides really focus and drill down into how you can provide this social and emotional knowledge and skill development and kind of advance their networks. So as I said, there's 3 typical roles of career and workplace mentors. It's to provide that social and emotional support, that knowledge and skill development, and that advocacy and sponsorship. So we'll jump into social and emotional support. And one of the main strategies is we've discussed this is creating that safe space, right? It's creating that opportunity for the mentee to understand that, no matter what I say or do, my mentor is going to accept me without judgment, listen to me, and still see me as worthy and valuable and provide me with support. And it really kind of boils down to being present, like we talked about, being engaged, not underestimating mentoring, listening, so being an active listener, supporting and encouraging their identity development and being careful with the language that we use, and then supporting confidentiality, which Aaron will talk about and I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. But the main point here is that social and emotional support really boils down to creating that warm and kind of caring environment, which the next slide really dives deeper into by focusing on that unconditional positive regard, which is defined as a mentor's ability to accept and support their mentee without judgment, regardless of their behavior or beliefs. And this is characterized by warmth, empathy, and that non-judgmental attitude that allows mentees to understand they are valuable, worthwhile, and important, regardless of their behavior. And this is a profound strategy for developing mentoring relationships. So, we all know that mentor that we've had where when we come in and we meet with them, we know that no matter what we say or do, they're going to accept us, not judge us, and provide us with support. And we leave those meetings glowing. We feel like we're 10 feet tall because they provide us with that unconditional positive regard. In contrast, when you have conditional positive regard as a mentor, you're really only there to provide support, guidance, and encouragement when the mentee is doing what you want them or expect them to do. And that's a recipe for disaster, right? That's a recipe for a really poor mentoring relationship. Now, although unconditional positive regard is a really effective strategy for building that foundational level of trust, respect, and caring, and kind of creating that safe space, I really want to stress that this isn't about blindly accepting and endorsing everything that your mentee says and does, but it's about accepting them for who they are as a person treating them with respect and dignity, no matter what they say or do, and just know that they're kind of doing the best that they can, and looking beyond their surface level behavior and mistakes, right? It's providing them with that patience and grace. So in the next slide, we'll talk about how you can do this. So based on research, it boils down to 4 strategies. The first is to obviously express care and support, right? So emphasize, acknowledge, and celebrate your mentee's positive attributes, strengths, and assets on a regular basis. So I know in my own mentoring relationship, I am intentional to make it a habit of noticing and vocalizing, that's an important point, vocalizing one positive thing about my mentee every time I see them. Because I want to make him feel like he's 10 feet tall every time he sees me, and let him know that I'm here and I support him and I'm providing him with that unconditional positive regard. The next strategy is to offer empathy, right? So we've discussed this a lot. So it's empathizing with your mentee's experiences, their decisions and actions without judgment, right? So allow your mentee to understand that, no matter what I say or do, my mentor is going to empathize what I have done, try to understand it and see beyond that kind of surface level behavior to get at the kind of the root issue of my behavior. Another strategy is accepting mistakes, right? So really treating your mentee with grace, with professionalism, by viewing their mistakes as opportunities for learning, development, and growth, adopting that growth mindset. So if they make a mistake, it's going to happen in your mentoring relationship. Don't jump down their throat, right? Treat it as an opportunity for learning and development, and let them know this is a safe space to try out new things and make mistakes, because this is the first time that they might be, having a formal employment experience. And then the final action is to vocalize your commitment, right? So let them know, I'm here for you. I'm dedicated to this mentoring relationship. I'm going to see this through. I signed up for this and I'm going to follow through on my commitments. I'm not going anywhere, no matter what you say or do, right? So positive reinforcing strategies, again, for providing that social and emotional support. So we have another Slido poll. So can you think of someone in your own life who has provided you with unconditional positive regard? What did it look like and what did it feel like? Grandparents, yeah. Good example of natural mentors. Kids, yeah, we can also provide unconditional positive regard to our children, right? That's a good example for those of you who have children. You can understand the concept of unconditional positive regard. My dog, yep, absolutely. Yeah, so these mentors made you feel safe, supported, valued, appreciated. They were consistent. They made you feel empowered. That's a great answer. Yep. So, as we can see, unconditional positive regard has had an impact on, some of us on the call today. And all the reasons, the ways it makes us feel just is another testimony to how powerful this strategy can be for developing that close and nurturing mentoring relationship. So we're going to move on just for the sake of time. And I apologize for my pace. I have a lot of content to get through in an hour and a half, but you will have the recording if you want to go back and the slides. So now we're going to discuss, after we kind of have that social and emotional support, let's jump into the knowledge and skill development. And one of the main things for knowledge and skill development is setting professional goals, right? So it's a central process of any workplace and career mentoring program and relationship, because again, it's not approaching mentorship in kind of a casual process. It's providing clarity and direction to, hey, you and I are going to meet for this X amount of time. What are we going to work on? How are we going to pursue those goals? How are we going to monitor and track those goals? And the final point here is, I can't stress this enough, this is a collaborative process. So you as a mentor will bring knowledge and kind of an idea of what some some constructive and helpful goals might be. But again, you're not there to provide directives or kind of take control of the mentoring relationship. It's up to your mentee to also set personally relevant and meaningful goals for themselves. But of course, you're there to help kind of guide that process. Next slide, please, Michelle. Now, in the research literature, as you all know, there are hundreds of approaches and resources to support professional goal setting in mentoring relationships. But despite that kind of diversity, it really boils down to emphasizing the importance of collaboration and kind of mentee voice. So what I just focused on, kind of co-constructing goals. And in a future slide, Aaron is going to talk about how you will be able to kind of do this using the mentorship guide that they've developed, which is kind of a hands-on practical tool that you'll all be able to use kind of during, before, and kind of after your mentoring relationships to set these goals with your mentees. So just know that you'll have that practical tool to support you with this. Another way that we can support knowledge and skill development is through providing professional feedback, right? Of course, this is a core process. And if it's done correctly, providing feedback can, help mentees identify their areas for growth and opportunities for further development and start, generating ideas for working towards those. But if it's done incorrectly, it can demotivate our mentees and make them withdraw from the mentoring relationship and sometimes the broader organization. So we really need to be intentional about how we do this. So a common approach to providing professional feedback that's research informed is something called wise feedback. And wise feedback is when a mentor provides their mentee with constructive and actionable feedback. So you provide the feedback that is constructive, followed by an empowering explanation as to why the feedback is being delivered, and a genuine belief in the mentee's ability to improve and grow. So this boils down to three processes. The first, as I mentioned, is to provide that constructive and actionable feedback. So, you're going to provide your mentee with feedback that's kind of substantive, it's clear, and it's kind of informative. The next step is to convey your high expectations. So this is that empowering explanation piece. And it's saying, it's conveying to your mentee that you're providing them with this feedback because you deeply care about them, see their potential, and have high standards for their professional development. And then the final piece is discussing your mentee's potential. So the mentor informs their mentee that they are providing the feedback because their mentee has potential to reach the standards and content of the feedback. Right? So it's this idea that we provide feedback and say, hey, I noticed that you could improve on this by doing X, Y, and Z. I'm providing you this feedback just so you know, because I have really high expectations for you, and I know based on your past experience and work ethic that you can really reach these goals. I'm kind of encouraging you to become a bit better, and I really believe in your potential to not only achieve this feedback, but kind of incorporate it into your professional sense of self and kind of achieve what I'm kind of laying out in this feedback. So wise feedback really, it's powerful because it allows mentees to understand why you're providing them feedback and maybe setting high expectations and kind of nudging them towards improvement. And it really reduces those chances of your mentee kind of misinterpreting the feedback as a sign that you don't value their abilities or see their potential. So the next section is focusing on this advocacy and sponsorship piece. And I'm going to move over this content a bit quicker than I already am moving. I apologize just for the sake of time. So, advocacy and sponsorship, we've discussed social and emotional support and knowledge and skill development. Those might be kind of obvious for some of you. You might have come to this training session expecting to have to kind of do and provide those roles, but maybe you haven't heard of advocacy and sponsorship. But it's really a fundamental component of any workplace and career mentoring program. And it really boils down to expanding mentees' professional networks, possibilities, and opportunities in the workplace. And as a mentor, you do this by kind of leveraging your influence, reputation, and social capital within CPRA. So just a definition, social capital is the resources that are accessed and exchanged in relationships between people and organizations. And visibility is the degree to which your mentees' current contributions and future potential are seen, valued, and recognized by other employees and senior leaders. So how do we actually go about doing this? So, we can expand our mentees' professional networks using kind of 4 research-informed strategies. We can obviously facilitate introductions, right? So don't be afraid to introduce your mentee to other colleagues, leaders, and professional networks that will help them pursue their goals. The second is to encourage networking, right? So encourage your mentee to attend industry events, conferences, internal and external professional development opportunities, and kind of other professional gatherings that will kind of facilitate their networking. The third strategy is to organize shadowing opportunities. So if your mentee is interested in a certain department or position outside of yours at CPRA, take the initiative to schedule a job shadowing opportunity for them for a day. And you can also introduce them to online communities. So inform your mentee about the various online communities, in your profession. Encourage them to become members of professional associations, subscribe to maybe some popular and helpful mailing lists, newsletters, and communities of practice. And I'm going to skip over this slide, Michelle, just for the sake of time, but you can all go back and kind of learn about how you can increase visibility and opportunity in action. It just kind of boils down to kind of slamming your fist on the table and kind of advocating for your mentee and talking about them in meetings and exposing them to new projects and kind of nominating them for learning opportunities, etc. So we can move on. So this final section is really helping you to develop a mentoring relationship. And we wanted to focus on some of the stages of mentoring relationships. So there are 3 stages. So, every relationship has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and mentoring relationships are obviously no exception. Stage 1 is usually developing rapport and trust building. So we're building that foundation of trust, care, and respect between mentors and mentees. And it's really characterized by kind of exploration and discovery as you are kind of engaging in conversation with your mentee, understanding their goals, values, and needs, and kind of understanding what you're going to be focusing on. The next stage is demonstrating commitment and reaching goals. And this is really focusing on helping that your mentee advance their knowledge and skills and kind of advancing them professionally. And this stage is characterized by both planning and action, as you're kind of setting and achieving professional goals and providing them with that, again, that wise form of feedback. And then finally, the final stage is that closure and constructive transition. And this is really about acknowledging learning outcomes, milestones, and kind of helping your mentee prepare for their next career stage or step. And we'll discuss more about that closure and constructive transition in a few slides. In the next slide, we really want to focus about what can you do in your first mentoring session. Usually what we encourage is to, get to know each other and establish ground rules. So as I've discussed, what is this mentoring relationship going to look like? What are the parameters of the relationship? And then we're looking on kind of establishing that mentorship agreement. So in a few moments, Aaron's going to really detail the components of the mentoring agreement and how you can use that to facilitate and kind of manage your first mentoring session with your mentee. You can also brainstorm your goals, right? So As you are getting to know one another, maybe you invite your mentee to tell you about, who they are, what they want to accomplish during this mentoring relationship, and maybe how you can help them as a mentor. And then, obviously, and arguably the most important part of that first mentoring session is to build that connection, right? Through that unconditional positive regard, that empathy. And to support that, in the next slide, we have, a little bit of a helpful graphic of, when we meet someone, we kind of discuss this waterline of visibility. So we see their skin color, their gender, their race, maybe we get a general sense of their age. But as we all know, knowing someone is much deeper than that. It's looking below the waterline, at their heritage, their learning styles, their skills, their family status. Now, some of these things you might find, oh, I don't really want to ask about that. And you don't have to. It's just encouraging you to recognize that your mentee is much more than who they present in their physical form and what you can see, right? And it's about creating that unconditional positive regard for them to feel safe enough to, share some of these parts of themselves with you during those kind of that mentoring relationship. And then in the next slide, we have some curious questions that you can use to maybe facilitate and help with that first mentoring session with your mentee, right? So, what are some goals you'd like to focus on? What courses do you enjoy? What are some of your career interests? Where do you see yourself after your post-secondary education, et cetera, et cetera? So just another opportunity for you to kind of lean upon during that first session to get to know your mentee. So the next slide is just setting the stage for what a mentoring agreement is. So as I've mentioned a few times now, this will help you in that first mentoring session to kind of gauge kind of what you'll be focusing on and really outline the parameters of your relationship. So a mentoring agreement is really a learning contract between a mentor and mentee that outlines the structure, goals, and responsibilities of the relationship. And again, it brings that clarity, direction, and focus to workplace and career mentoring relationships, and is really kind of that tangible tool that you can use to guide not only that first mentoring session, but kind of the relationship as it develops. And now I'm going to turn it over to Erin, who's going to talk a little bit about building youth employee competencies, and then she'll jump into that mentorship guide.
Thanks so much, Ben. And thanks everyone for sticking with us. We've got a few more details to go over. And this section is a little bit more hands-on and practical. So in the chat, I have dropped in the mentorship guide that you should now have all received from your regional manager. The guide is also available in French, which I can also drop in the chat in case it's of interest. And we will be running this webinar again in French tomorrow for those who might be interested. So the mentorship guide, that document that you now all have, was put together with CPRA and with Mentor Canada. And it was also compiled with some information from Recreation North. So Recreation North has been a leader in our territories, building core competencies and skill development in the recreation sector. And as part of the guide, Recreation North gratefully allowed CPRA to include their self-assessment tool and also some core competencies and skills. So you'll see that in there. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. Perfect. So here's just a quick snapshot of what a guide looks like, and a quote. I won't read it out loud to you. You can look at it in the slides later, but really just talking about, this is feedback from mentors such as yourself saying they really found this guide helpful to establish that relationship. All right, so in the guide, there's a lot of sort of background information. Much of it we've touched upon today already in terms of what sorts of skills are we looking at, what are some of the unique features of mentoring relationships, benefits to both parties, etc. And then we get into the mentorship agreement. I believe it starts on about page 9. So part one looks like this. It defines the roles and responsibilities, and this is to be filled out by both the mentee, you'll see, and the mentor. So this really opens up the conversation right from the outset of this mentoring relationship, where the mentee, the youth in this particular program, has a chance to make commitments and to talk about what they are going to be responsible for in this relationship. And then the next page talks about, as the mentor, my roles and responsibilities will be, and you can fill this out together. And it really is a nice sort of structured way to go through some of the content that Ben was presenting earlier. Part two, and if you click again, Michelle, I think you'll get a snapshot of part two. There we go, is the mentee and mentor information. So basic information about exactly who's sort of involved in this relationship and some of the learning goals. So we would like our youth to make SMART goals, and I think many of us have had an opportunity to have some training in SMART goals. So I won't dive too deep into there, but anywhere from 1 to 5 things that they would like to focus on and work on. They can be hard skills, they can be soft skills, they can be all sorts of other things that might support the youth through this professional working relationship. And then the time commitment. The time commitment really just talks about, again, establishing clear parameters around what this mentorship relationship will be. So do we want to meet weekly? Do we want to meet every day? Is every day too much? How long do we want to meet? Should we check in once a month? You work with your mentee, with the youth, to establish a pattern that works for you. But really, what we want to highlight here is that there is a commitment to come back to these conversations, to revisit the learning goals that you've established, and to reopen the door for conversation throughout the workplace experience. It's not just something we establish at the beginning and then evaluate at the end. It's an ongoing piece of the dialogue. All right. So there we go. There's an example of part two that was filled out by someone. Again, their mentor, looks like it happened to be their supervisor in their workplace. And I will say that's a fairly common arrangement in this particular program, but by no means does it have to be the only relationship. And Ben touched beautifully upon that earlier, so I won't go any further into that. Part three is the goal setting and development plan. So you'll see there the mentee and mentor have an opportunity to develop some long-term goals, some short-term goals, and really break down what those goals are and how we're going to achieve them together. So establishing the goal, looking at, okay, what activities might contribute to the success or to my achievement of this goal? How long do I think it will take? Other details there. So if you click next slide, Michelle, there's an example of some goals that were set out. This is from a few years ago, but this is from a youth and a mentor who participated in the program, who were very generous in sharing this information with us as an example. And then finally, the evaluation component. So there's sort of there's an encouragement from CPRA to do a mid-program evaluation. So checking in about halfway through, if you're not checking in more regularly, to see where we are in terms of goal setting and progress towards those goals. Maybe they'll change at that point. Maybe things need to be reevaluated, or maybe you're right on track, or maybe you've accomplished them all at that point, and it's an opportunity to make some new commitments. And then again, an end of term assessment. And I think what's really nice about this program, you'll see here, there are some hard and soft skills and some opportunity for the mentee to reflect on their own progress and their own engagement in this program. It's not just sort of a top-down assessment or evaluation from their supervisor or their mentor of their own work. It's actually an opportunity for the youth to say, okay, how did I engage with this program? How did this program, affect my development? And did I honor the commitments that I made in this agreement? And then an opportunity for the mentee to provide feedback to the mentor as well. CPRA has provided this guide to everyone. Again, it's a guide and it's a tool, but it certainly by no means has to be the only tool. But we do feel strongly that these 4 components of the agreement really set the mentor and the mentee up for success throughout their journey together. And here again, we won't go into detail, but these are some of what the mentorship agreements look like. Again, this was from a mentor and a mentee who shared their commitments with us and their agreement with us. So thank you if they're here on this call. Thank you very much for sharing and for just, giving an example to those who might be new to the program or might be new to this work, who've never done this before, to be able to take a look at what some of that work will look like. This slide speaks to evaluation, and it's really a continuum. It's again, sort of going back to that point about it's not just one directional evaluation. It is an opportunity for growth, for connection, for communication, that sort of safe space to talk about how the relationship, how the work experience is progressing, challenges, successes. And we really want the youth or the mentee to be able to clearly communicate with the mentor and for the mentor to be able to communicate back to the mentee. And so the guide and the agreement that you had can help with that conversation. Great.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Erin. So the final step is obviously to close the relationship after you've done that evaluation. And this step, requires a bit of forethought and planning, because if you don't do it kind of constructively, it can lead to some confusion and maybe some dissatisfaction among mentees. So there are 5 things that research has shown that we can do to close relationships in a constructive manner. And the first is to openly discuss the closure, right? So just creating that space and time with your mentee to discuss your reactions or feelings about the closure of the relationship, right? So you might ask yourselves, what will you miss about your time together? What are you appreciative or grateful of? And do you have any questions about the closure or concerns? The second is to celebrate milestones and growth, right? So sitting down and again, making that space and time to appreciate one another, and kind of sharing that learning and development and those milestones that you kind of experience together. So, maybe thinking of an aha moment that you had together, sharing a key skill that you gained from your time together, or kind of that one piece of advice or golden nugget that you're going to hold on to. So just kind of celebrating and kind of sharing the positive changes. The third is to honor and protect confidentiality. So this is a little bit more important. And as I mentioned earlier, workplace mentoring relationships are really built on that trust and that mutual kind of sharing, and professional and personal boundaries can be blurred. So it's really important to sit down with one another and say, what is it okay to share outside of this relationship? What stories, experiences would you like to remain private? So really sitting down and outlining the parameters of your confidentiality, especially in a workplace, this is extremely important. Another strategy is to really kind of facilitate that constructive transition. So viewing this closure as an opportunity to help your mentee transition, right? Rather than kind of a loss or a termination. So prepare your mentee for their next steps in their career. Discuss their goals, next steps, or aspirations, and provide them with ideas or resources for accomplishing those next steps. Maybe you introduce them to another potential mentor or a network or learning opportunity. So just kind of seeing it as your kind of final act as a mentor to, support their next step rather than just kind of ending the relationship. And then the last research-informed strategy is to discuss post-closure contact. So, discuss whether and how you will stay in contact with one another. And it's really important here to avoid empty promises and mixed messaging. So don't say things like, oh yeah, we'll stay in touch or I'll see you around if you don't intend to do that, right? Be clear and direct. Outline kind of what you're comfortable with. Maybe you won't meet once a week or once a month, but maybe it's, they come to you when they need support, and outline to them, hey, I'm here to support you with, these topics, the small things or all the big things. So being really clear and kind of realistic about, going forward, how often are we going to meet? Why would you be approaching me? What topics am I able to address? Things like that. So again, just reiterating the importance of the closure process. It's often overlooked, but can kind of lead to confusion and dissatisfaction. It's just kind of like, oh, I guess we're not meeting anymore, or my mentor doesn't want to see me anymore. So bring some intentionality to that and kind of try to go through these 5 steps if you can. And I'll turn it over to Erin to close us out.
Thanks, Ben. Just want to share with all of you some quotes and some feedback that we've had. These 2 particular quotes are not from these individuals, but they are real feedback that we received from youth who've participated in the program. One in green talking about what they've learned from their mentor that really could not be learned from a textbook or in a classroom. It was through their relationship and through their mentoring journey that they learned so much. And then the other in blue, an experience of a newcomer to Canada and how valuable this experience and this program was to their involvement in their community and into the sector as well. On our website, on CPRA's website, we have featured some success stories of youth and mentors and the impact that they have had, on each other and on their communities. If this is something that you would be interested in, having a story written about your experience in the program that you're administering, please write to your regional manager, and we would happily get in touch with you, ask for a few photos, and we'll post those on the website. They're great for community content. They're great for youth to be able to move along to their next experience, to say, hey, look what I did. This is something they can add to their CV and something that they can really showcase as being involved in a mentorship opportunity that is one of only a handful across the country. And so we'll just circle back here on the learning objectives for today. Again, this whole presentation will be available on the CPRA YouTube site shortly. But really, we want to make sure that we've covered what is mentoring. I think Ben did an amazing job of doing that, so thank you. We touched upon the roles of mentors and what mentors and what mentor relationships can look like. Some research-informed strategies for supporting the mentors and the mentoring relationship, and then feeling confident about starting the experience. And we hope that through this webinar and with the mentorship guide, that you're now feeling much more equipped to embark on this program. So we'll invite you again one more time to join us on Slido to talk about what the most valuable things are that you learned today. To celebrate, yes, that's a great one. And if Slido isn't working, you can certainly post it in the chat. Yeah, that the relationship is a two-way relationship. And the value of putting some structure to the mentorship relationship. Celebration again. Validating what I do as a mentor. So that's great that some of you have some experience in this area already, and that your experience is being validated through this training program. That's wonderful. Value and potential when talking about feedback. Exactly. Lots to learn, and that's okay. We all have something to learn. Transition, celebration, unconditional positive regard. These are wonderful. Okay, thank you. Before we close, I think we have a few more slides, do we, Michelle? Yeah, perfect. So I'll just touch here. There are some resources available to you if you'd like to check them out later. The mentorship guide, is also up on Mentor Canada's website. You'll see it there. Mentor Canada's linked to their website and some online orientation for mentors. Ben, if you wanted to add any additional information about those, other than just encouraging people to check them out, I'll let you do that.
Yeah, no, I would just encourage them to visit the website, and I can send some resources as well to you, Erin, if you want.
Perfect. And we'll be sending out after this. So once this session is up on YouTube, we'll send you that the session. We'll send you a link to a formal evaluation. It won't take long. It'll be 2-3 minutes of an online survey. But we do value your feedback, and we use that feedback in informing our next training sessions and in our next webinars for mentors and for other programs. So please do provide that feedback. Positive or constructive or mix of both. We really do look at all of the thoughts that are shared with us. And I'll encourage folks, if they want to either turn on their microphones or post a question in the chat. We have a few extra minutes here to open up some discussion. Maybe while people are thinking about a question, I'll just say thank you to Mentor Canada for supporting CPRA through this program for the last 3 years. We so value this relationship and this partnership and all of the support that you've brought the Parks and Recreation sector. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, Michelle, who's been driving the slides today, to Tracy, your CEO, who was sort of inaugural in putting all this stuff together from the very beginning 3 years ago. We really appreciate it. And thank you, of course, to the Government of Canada for funding this program. And Court